Hey everybody, this is Tales off the Holotables. It feels really weird to be doing another one of these intros because I did this literally 2 nights ago. I don't think I'm supposed to say that, but I don't care. I'm here today with Dave, who I've been communicating with on Reddit pretty often about the math related posts that I put up. And I kind of feel emasculated because I'm always saying like, hey, I do things at a fourth grade level. I'm just doing what the kids are doing in school, and everything that I do is easy. And you're always coming back at me with messages. You're like, hey, I have this and I have that, and I know how to do stats. And so I'm going to leave that to you to explain, but and everything about yourself, but you're more the guru than I am.
Well, thanks for having me. My name is David. My in-game username, which I've never said out loud before, is swaggyboy1337. Made it when I was 16. I'm now 22, so this game has been with me before I even graduated high school. Now I've gone through college and I'm still playing this game. I'm a guild leader. I'm an alliance leader. I've always loved this game. I spend probably too many hours per day playing this game. And I mean, when you first made your post about the starting to collect data on the Chirotech shock prod data, I thought, I'm going for school for stats. Let's answer probably the biggest open question in this video game's history. And today we're about to solve it, what I believe, conclusively.
Hopefully, right? Because we were actually chatting just before, and what's always funny about these things is no matter how much data I throw at people, there's still somebody that says, oh, this and that and the other thing. And now what's important though is I've been telling you for days, like, don't tell me, I don't want to know, don't give me the information, I don't want to hear it. So while I am looking on my PC at the summary that we've put up, and I can make my own conclusions based upon going to high school, you have a much more in-depth analysis, and we'll go into that later. But the important thing is, you know what you're talking about. You have a degree. You're going for even more education on this very topic. And the people that we generally communicate with on Reddit, very unlikely to be the ones who are deciding to watch this. They probably don't have the qualifications that you have. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So I got my bachelor's of science in math, and I just this past December got my master's of arts in statistics, going for a PhD in statistics. And the methodology that I use for this, I ran it by some other statisticians. Ivan, my PhD advisor, I showed it to her.
Did you tell her what it was like? Hey, this is for a game.
I didn't tell her
just
that
need to know. Here's numbers.
Personal project. Yeah, personal project.
Okay. So the difference between us is I went to school for 4 years. I actually only have my associate's degree. I switched colleges 3 times. Some things transferred over, some things didn't transfer over. I have learned that I'm not really great in a school environment, which is ironic because I also now work in a school, but it's different at the younger ages. So I've experienced higher math, and I've experienced calculus, and I've experienced stats, but I was also the kid taking an 8 a.m. class and falling asleep because I just didn't get enough sleep the night before.
I currently teach 8 a.m. calculus, so I've been on both sides of that particular thing. I guess I kind of, since, yeah, you didn't like school but became a teacher, I love school and almost reluctantly became a teacher. So we kind of have an inverse journey there. I never thought I'd be a teacher. My dad and my grandpa are both teachers, but I never thought I'd be one. But when I started grad school, basically I was given the offer, free college and a salary if you teach math. So obviously I said yes. And
that's a really hard thing to pass up.
Yeah. And kind of just went into it. I was given a textbook and told on Friday and told start teaching stats on Monday, and kind of had to figure it all out from there. Now I've been teaching for like 5 semesters. So it's definitely, so I have taught statistics and calculus. So also I'm hoping that for anyone who does want to hear my analysis I can explain it in a very easy to understand way because I've been teaching college freshmen who don't understand math at all this very same math. So definitely, I'll do my best to make it as simple to explain as possible.
I think what happens is we have people that are in three groups, right? There are people that already believe me. There are people who will never believe me. And then you have the people that are like the agnostics, right? They're like kind of not sure. They're in the middle. They don't know what to believe. There's this guy on the internet who says this, and then there's a bunch of other guys on the internet with their tinfoil hats saying this other thing. So the goal and the hope, and we've done this before. We've done it with Endgame shards. We've done this with Bronzium currency. I think this is actually really maybe only the third major one. I've got another one coming up that I've been working on myself, and we can maybe talk about that later
Yeah, sure.
to kind of figure that stuff out. But to jump over that for a second, there's something that you had said a little bit earlier. So you're 22. I'm 14 years older than you. I've been playing games literally my whole life. My first game that I remember playing is Mega Man 2 on like my mom's 9-inch TV. It's a very, very vivid memory. But just like you, the name Egnards, it comes from playing Star Wars Galaxies when I was like 13 or 14. And it was Egnar Atop. And the name has evolved a little bit since then over the course of what, 23 years, but this name has been in use for a very, very, very considerable amount of time. So, keep with it.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars as a franchise is probably, the first movie I can ever remember watching. Maybe I watched some Disney movies and whatever, but when I was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, my dad showed me my first Star Wars movie, and ever since I've been, hooked. Obviously, this game, I don't know, I'd probably spend between playing the game and being a guild and alliance leader, I don't know, like 3 hours a day on this game for the past 6 years straight. I don't even want to just do the multiplication and figure out how many hours that is. But I mean, Star Wars is just, there's something so special about it that like I never thought I'd play a mobile game for 6 years. I'm a gamer. Right now I'm playing a few different games, but I haven't stuck with any game, even like multiplayer, like MMO type games for more than a few months. But I feel like there's something really special about this game. Not the game itself, I always said it's a mediocre mobile game, but something about the community. I really feel like the guilds in general are the thing that has kept this game going past like 6 months.
100%. I've been with my guild, maybe not as long as you. I'm not sure. I've been with them for about 3.5, 4 years. And I had my guild leader on a few episodes ago, and we were chatting. And, I've had other guild members send me games, and I'll send them back games. And we just kind of know who each other is. And, we're involved in each other's lives. And that's what I've always liked about gaming. And that's what drew me to like massive multiplayer games, is being online and being, part of a community outside of what's going on in your life, and people that kind of know you all around the world. It's been really cool to talk to people and be like, hey, this guy's from Australia. This guy's from, I talked to a guy in Japan. You and I actually live fairly close
Yeah.
by, which is, that's even cool too, to be how small is the world that I'm chatting with this guy for months, and he lives maybe within two hours of where I am.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, over the course, I've, for my guild alone, through turnover and whatever, probably had over 300, 400 people pass through. There's like three guys who've been here since day one they've seen me graduate high school, graduate undergrad, get a master's. I've seen them get married, have kids, and, chatting with people, from here all the way to Australia, and someone even helped me get an internship a year or so back. Like, there's something so special about this community of Star Wars players. It's hard to like really describe it. Just like, like you said, we're all playing this game on our phones, sneaking off to the bathroom, they get our daily refreshes in, whatever. And it just like this Star Wars in general is a very divisive community. Look what's happening with this new movie and everything, and all these divisive YouTubers. We have, all these
You can name
misogyny
drop
and
here.
all
I don't
those.
care about my reputation. It's fine. Say whatever you want.
Well, I mean, like Star Wars theory. Have you heard of that recently?
So it's funny because now I'm on YouTube. I don't watch a lot of videos of anything. Most of my news about Star Wars comes from one, the game, two, people in my guild, so the game, and then three, my brother who's 10 years older than me. And he literally he was born in 1977, so like he grew up Star
Oh
Wars.
wow.
And anything comes out, I'll get the trailer, or I'll get this, or I'll get that, and go, oh, this is coming out. It's so great. Um, but I don't really deep dive into anything because I just don't have the time to watch things.
Yeah, there was this whole controversy days ago where probably the biggest Star Wars YouTuber, his name's Star Wars Theory, basically said that women can't be Star Wars fans. Um, which I mean, absolutely atrocious, horrible thing to say. And the overall Star Wars community has gotten so much hate, over the course of the sequel trilogy, with a lot of sexist attacks towards certain actors, some of them also fledgling racism and all that. But I feel like this community, even though we're all Star Wars fans, is so much more positive. Obviously, there's still divisive parts within it. Within just like the subreddit, there's always going to be people hating on others for accomplishment posts and stuff like that. But our subsect of the Star Wars community is just such a positive and like friendly place, which is really special and something that I wish would carry out to the larger community.
I do think I give Reddit a lot of shit for being like a cesspool. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. And I mean, I guess I would largely agree with you when I look at like the larger Star Wars community, because people are very, very, very strong in their opinions. But I do think some of those voices that are antagonistic are just so large and so loud that they rain out just maybe a little bit more than the positive voices or the neutral voices, or the voices that like are intelligent and making counterpoints or whatever else it is. And I saw it this morning. There was a post about me. I woke up and I was tagged in it. I don't know if you saw that, but it's always funny when I read those, and I comment on them because people expect me to, but I try to stay a little away, and I'll read through like a lot of the antagonistic posts and just kind of laugh at them.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad that people, just in general, spend their time hating on other people. I mean, the biggest waste of time you could ever do in your life is hate someone else.
Yeah.
Like, and especially we're playing a 6 out of 10 mobile game, with a developers that, well, they didn't start off this year on a good note with Bo-Katan, but and that awful Datacron, but I feel like also because of that, we as a community have kind of made the fun for ourselves through
Yes.
Discord and guilds.
Yes.
You know,
If not for Discord, I joined Discord for my last guild, but I wasn't active in it. And I've become a lot more active in it over the last 3-4 years. I think without that environment, I probably would have left to the game.
oh, certainly.
Because I do care about the people that I play with, and when we have like our away channels and people say, hey, there's this family emergency, or like this happened, you are legitimate, like I want to help you. I know it's infeasible because I live 12 hours away, but if there's something, like tell me. You're my friend, you're part of my family in a small way.
Oh yeah, I mean, just unfortunately last week, I mean, a guild member reached out to me because he was rushed to the emergency room, and he lives, I think, South Africa, and I've never met him. He's been with my guild for less than a year, and still, I mean, that bond forms, I feel, pretty quickly.
Very quick.
And I feel like it's because there's no intra-guild competitions. Like I would totally love a grand arena that is just with your guildies. But like the fact that everything we do together is cooperative also adds to that. I mean, territory battles, territory wars, raids, obviously you don't like it if someone doesn't participate, and then you got to kick them. But overall, it's just that is something the game has done very well overall, giving us reasons to cooperate and strategize together.
On that point, I do all of the, we were talking about this a few days ago. I do all the recruiting for my guild. But the deal that I've made with my guild leader is I don't handle any of the booting or the kicking because I personally can't handle it. So we have a guy who that's just his job and that's the only thing he handles. And I'm sure he doesn't like it, but that's his one responsibility is to respectfully talk to these people. I refuse because nobody would ever leave our guild ever, even though I recognize sometimes you have to do it for the good of everybody else.
Yeah, as a guild leader, like I founded my guild, and I've been the primary recruiter for my entire guild's lifespan. Did have another guy who came in for a bit, helped me out. I've had people in the beginning. We for the first few months had someone who was the person who kicks people. But I've kind of taken that responsibility for the past like 4 years because I feel like if I'm the guy in charge, I need to be the one who tells people this is why you're leaving. And I hate it every time. There's very few times where I've not felt bad about it.
Yeah.
Like occasionally someone who, says something really nasty or just doesn't do anything for a week or whatever. But it is so hard to tell someone who's been with me for at least a few months, like, you're out. Sometimes they get a second chance if they're just slacking, hard period in their life, but it's definitely so hard to say goodbye to someone. And then, of course, we're both at like the 550 million GP level. It is so hard to recruit because the number of people looking for a guild at our level might not even be triple digits,
It's a very small group, and unlike a year ago with like Geonosis, where it didn't really matter who you recruited, as long as they fit your guild culture and as long as they were around your GP level, fine, you're in. And if you don't do well, I'm just gonna boot you in a week and I'll find somebody else. But now you have to find like hyper specific people because of like platoons and operations.
Ugh.
It's a pain in my ass every single time.
Yeah, I work closely with our TB officer because, I get why they added relic levels to platoons. I guess it was the next natural progression, but it makes it so annoying. How many people are going to want to, R9 cup or whatever? Like,
I've got a Hoth Rebel soldier. I have R9 Mon Mothma. So as an officer, I take one for the team whenever it comes up, but there's only so much I can do.
yeah, we have some of the Krakens for that, but it's just, the past 3 people that came to the guild all did, I think it was an R8 Bad Batch Echo, and they all left. So then I had to ask, so then that was 4 or 5 times I had to ask someone for this one character, which obviously there's in general no need to bring Echo up that high, he's pretty good at R5.
And he's useful, but R5 is really all you have to do.
Yeah. Maybe R7 for Zepho if you do the Bad Batch, but
I'm not there yet. I don't have to worry about that until Cal Kestis comes back.
yeah, CG, please bring Cal Kestis back.
I was actually, so I did my first like my first big stream this morning. It's Sunday morning. I figured what the hell. And I was kind of talking about that with people. On the one hand, I do want Cal Kestis back. On the other hand, I remember how long it took Grand Inquisitor to come back and the shit show that the subreddit was. And it was just really fun, all of the memes that came out. So on the one hand, it'll help me if the rest of my guild can get him. And on the other hand, I'm kind of like, I'm there for it. Like I'm ready for those memes to come back.
Memes are great. I remember with Grand Inquisitor, I think he came back. What was it, like December or January?
And then he came back. It was 6 months. Yeah, it was about.
And then it was like June or July where he came back again for like permanently. I remember that night I stayed up for like 4 hours trying to get the mission because I knew he wasn't going to come back in a while. And then by the time he came back, we all had Reva anyway. And some people used Reva to unlock Grand Inquisitor.
I remember waking up because I didn't have him either. Like I had to wake up. Not that I had to. I just wake up very early. I woke up at like 4 in the morning. It was Christmas Eve. And for 3 fucking hours, I was doing like that whole mission thing because of the stupid fulcrum tier. And I was laying in bed doing it. Like, this is so stupid. Like, why am I fucking doing this right now? But I knew if I didn't do it then, I wasn't going to do it another day. And I knew that I needed Grand Inquisitor,
Yeah.
or I'd get in a lot of shit with everybody else in the guild. And it was an off. I hated that fucking event.
And that's the culture of this game too. Like the fact that you're obviously not the only one who did that. I mean, I did the same thing, the same day. Like, but it's just something about this game like compels us to do crazy shit like that. That if we said it to anyone else, they'd be like, "Why are you doing that? Just
Yeah.
sleep in, or it's Christmas Eve. Go enjoy it."
Going, well, that's why I was kind of thinking, because I like this morning, for example, I woke up at 3:45.
Jeez.
Uh, and yeah, it sucks. I woke up at 3:45, and I was at my in-laws last night, and my father-in-law is a big hippie, and he was like, "Oh, you don't sleep really well. Let me give you this like CBD, try it." And I was like, "All right, let me try it." I tried it last night. It did not work at all. I was up earlier than normal, but like when I'm up, I'm up. So at
Yeah, me too.
3:45, I'm like, "All right, well, I guess I'm just getting out of bed now and going about my day." So Christmas Eve, it wasn't even a matter of waking up early on purpose. It was just, that's my life.
But it was playing the game for 3 hours straight.
But it was playing the game for 3 hours straight until whatever time it was, like 7, 8 in the morning, when I could have been doing something productive with that time.
Yeah, and events like that and like conquest are reasons I'd never have an alt account. I don't. There's some things I never want to relive in this game, and definitely the Grand Inquisitor event, like the first time doing gas back in the day. I
People
just
don't
no thank you.
realize I've never been about alt accounts, no matter what, any game that I play. I did have one in WoW back in the day, um, probably before your time, back in vanilla WoW. We used to have, I don't know if they still do it, but we'd have like Twink PvP, where we would PvP at like a lower level. So you would be like a level 39, but like all decked out in like the best level 39 gear. And that was a lot of fun because you didn't have all of the things that were available to your class, and you had to like make it work. So I did do an alt for that, but other than that, like I just cannot bring myself to replay things.
Yeah, I respect people who do it. I mean, we have like two people in my guild with alt accounts. They're great guys, but just I mean, also I think the fact that you're an officer in the guild, I'm a leader of a guild, like that's the alt
So
account right there. That's where all the time goes anyway.
that it takes a lot of time, and like I'm sure you use hot utilities too to like save
All right.
yourselves time. And so I will do like a slash TB deployment call,
Oh yeah.
and it'll ping like 20 people, and 10 of them will be like, "I'm doing my stuff right now, calm down." And I'll be like, "Listen, it'll either take me 20 minutes to look through in game to see who's doing things, or it'll take me 30 seconds to just do this TB deploy command. Chill out. Like, my time is valuable too."
Oh yeah. Or the new raid notify command.
Mm-hmm.
We just upped our over the past month. We were raising our minimum now to 8.5 mil.
So you're going for the next box,
We're not going for the 666 mil box because it's just like an
but
extra.
you're ahead of us because you're at the fourth box then.
Yeah, we get about
Yeah.
500 million score
Okay.
roughly.
Nobody in my guild, I have never once manualed that raid. Not even a single time.
I only do it for Leia. The Actually, you know what? I do. I do play manual, but basically, I wrote a really succinct guide of. I mean, basically taking all the information. Two rebels slash Ewoks and an Imperial trooper, and
Yeah.
just don't press the middle button on the Imperial trooper.
That's what I've heard. I was listening to Celiac Sarah, who was probably the first person I started listening to prepare for an episode with her, and I just kind of got pulled into her podcast because it's good. I like it, and for me, that's saying a lot. And she says the same thing. Like, everyone's like, just the middle button is useless. Don't use it ever. But I've never even bothered, and I just get the score that I can get. And I think that in my guild, that's our guild mentality: is nobody wants to do it.
Oh, I mean, I think that's a near universal mentality. the thing is with like, so since we just raised it to 8.5 mil, that's just 424 divided by 50, which is where we came
Yeah,
up.
that's not, I mean, that's honestly, that's not that bad. I do maybe 7.5 just on auto. And realistically, if I were in your guild, my mentality wouldn't be, okay, let me do 3 teams on manual. It would be, let me raise a few guys their relic levels so that I can auto a little bit higher than I am now.
Yeah, that's valid. Like, yeah, the Leia solo, I mean, thank God for that. Like, the guys on the raid server did so nice. And I talked to the guy who basically pioneered the strategy, Ecliptic Enter, and he gave me a better, like a streamlined guide that like works flawlessly with the mod loadout. Someone in my guild was nice enough to make a hot utils loadout for Alliance, which it's still a pain because you have to go save all your mods, then switch it, then save it back. But the entire raid takes like 30 minutes. And I mean, at
It's,
least like my goal, because I think I kind of failed for the Great Raid. We kind of didn't push anything too far, and we got to,
we
I
didn't
don't even
either.
remember what the box was. But here we definitely tried to get to the 424 pretty early. Obviously, with like the C3PO cheese in November and
Yeah.
stuff, it was hyperinflated scores. But I realized just with Leia and like JML requirements, you can get to 10 mil with like what I call lazy manual, which is just don't
Yeah.
press that one button very, very easily without any remodding except on Leia.
Yeah, I did try to convince my officer team. I was like, hey, should we like pull the guild? And they were like, no, we don't want to do it. And I was like, that, that's fine. Like I don't actually care that much because we were only doing the 128 mil on crate. For the same reason, nobody wanted to run more than 1 team.
Yeah.
And I was willing to do 1 team on manual, which was Jabba. It was a very quick run.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and with the 208 box, it's a higher box in terms of actual rewards. So I'm like, whatever, I'm getting more than I was before. And quite honestly, like I've got 1,000 of both Chirotech at this point, and I know that's like a very first world white people problem, but like I'm not hurting for materials, so I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I think out of like if we were to rank all of CG's biggest blunders for the past 8 years, this raid is probably a top 5. This, like the invention of datacrons.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like blanking on everything right now. The great nerf for 2021, that could be up there. Just a bunch of I mean, they
So
still reducing the total sim numbers from 8 to 5. Still so
what
stupid.
with the sim numbers, I remember when it was 5, and I think it was actually 3 before I started playing.
I think it was, yeah, that was before my
And
time too.
around when I started, it was 8 because Phoenix had come out and they were like experimenting. Maybe it was Old Republic
It was
that they
Jedi
started
Revan.
experimenting.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
Jedi
okay.
Revan.
So that's when they started experimenting with it. And then they brought it back. But I was so casual at the time that I didn't really care or notice. I was like, all right, whatever. I'm just gonna get them a little later. I wasn't doing math. I wasn't figuring things out. I was just farming shit to farm shit. But with the great nerf of like the defense, I grew up in the age of massive multiplayer games, and you're constantly getting balance patches. And I know that that's harder to do in this game space because a lot of money changes hands
Yeah.
and people spend thousands to get certain things quickly. But for me, I was like, whatever, this is just a balance patch. Like it's fine. I grew up in an age where that was normal.
I think I think the bad part was they did it well, they did it right before Lord Vader came out because they knew
Yes.
Darth Vader would then be Lord Vader plus Darth Vader would destroy everything. It was just kind of jarring. I think that was the
It
big
was a
issue.
huge change. And the biggest problem there was Watt because they never like everyone else still functioned pretty well, but his one tech is almost useless now.
Yeah.
It's
And
like, oh, you got this one, and that one's whatever.
gas also, I mean his damage numbers are still,
Have gone
nowhere
significantly
near.
down. The one thing that I wish that they did with this raid, and I made a post on it, and it didn't get a lot of traction, and I don't know if that's because I posted it at the wrong time of day or because people didn't like it, is with crate, I'm very happy that they went from 3 days to 6 days. Like that's perfect.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But they raised it from 5 to 8 battles, so it almost negates itself, especially when you're doing not five very different runs, but eight of what is pretty much exactly the same strategy.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the speed break raid is basically a different game.
Yes.
Like, I remember I watched Arnold's initial impression on it, and he's like, "This doesn't," or it was when the Leia journey came out, and the old tier where you play as Leia, and he's like, "This is not Luke Skywalker. This is not Leia. This is just pixels pressing buttons," and that's exactly what it is. Like, I don't, in general, I don't play this game for the Star Wars nostalgia per se. Some of the events were with the cinematics, like the Mandalorian event and stuff, were really well done. But I mean, the speeder bike raid, it just, looking at like the Ewoks ass and stuff, like, no, thank you. Like
Or
having Imperial
it's
troopers shoot other Imperial troopers,
doesn't make sense.
it's yeah, just the opposite of immersion. I mean, C3PO on a speeder bike, like, where did they come up with this? At least
So
it's audible.
yes,
Otherwise,
yes.
I feel like there would have been a riot, but at
And at
least
a pretty decent efficiency. Like I get like
yeah.
probably 75% of the score that I would have gotten. But what I think they should have done is allowed me to set like secondary squads so that I still needed to R8 stuff and I still needed to spend money, but let me do all of my runs in one run. If you could say, okay, do one run and you can increase your multiplier by adding these other characters in the background, I would R8 every fucking one of those characters just to be able to do one manual run in 2 to 3 minutes and get like whatever score I need to get in that time. And they
That'd be
still
nice.
keep their monetization.
That'd be really nice. Uh, I mean, at least though, I've noticed besides R8ing or R9ing Leia and having her in JML, you don't need any extra investment to really do good. Obviously, some guilds are R8ing 24 characters and whatever,
Yeah.
but they have the money for that.
That's the thing. Who's got the money? I don't at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Good for them that they have that income, but
yeah, don't get me wrong,
unfortunately.
we have our whales. I have crackers and crackers. Crack. We're all crackers. Oh, canceled. We have our Krakens in the guild, like who the second something comes out, okay, now it's gone to G13. We have 2 or 3 of those guys. Like, great. It funds me being able to play it much cheaper. Like, I'm cool with that. Do whatever the hell you want. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have I think 2 or 3 Bo-Katans in the guild and stuff. The Krakens are always nice to have, and they can fund CG. Not as if CG hasn't made an absolute shit ton of money on this game. I mean,
Almost $2 billion.
yeah, I mean, this movie's made more than, or it's almost as much as The Force Awakens. Like, so CG is doing just fine, and obviously EA gets enough money from their load of garbage video games that they put out, and occasional good ones. But
The one thing I will
Star
say
Wars,
though
yeah,
is when it comes to this game, and I don't play like you. I don't play a lot of games long term. This is the one game I've played this long. I've never played a game as long as I've played this game. I've played a lot of them though. I've played like there's a Final Fantasy one that was shit. Played Marvel Strike Force. I've played Home. I've played them all. This one, in terms of free to play friendly, it's on the better side of things in terms of monetization. Like you can achieve without spending very much money. It is going to take you a very long time.
and I also think that part ties into the constant need to like push guilds further, or as an individual to just climb higher and higher guilds, because like one of the good parts about this new raid system is you can buy R8 and R9 pieces.
Yeah.
Like that I feel like really, and just the new raid store. I don't like that they did take out some degree of the raid rewards when they switched the system, but it's I mean, obviously they're building up to R10 and potentially a new system. You know, who knows? Like Marvel had their Red Stars or whatever it was called,
Yeah.
but which I feel like could come at some point to this game. But at least that eased a good chunk of it. Like I had one R9, I had like Piet, but now I have a handful because I can now buy the pieces. So
Yeah.
that part
Yeah.
I've really liked. But of course, it keeps pushing individuals to seek higher and higher guilds. I posted on one of the subreddits because my guild needs a spot, and I had someone, nice guy, he messaged me. He's like, I have 3 million GP. I'll shoot my shot. I'm like no, like this is not. That's not how the game works. And unfortunately, like if someone at our level, we're like 11 mil GP. If there's someone with 8 mil GP in like a 450 million guild, in 1 year from now, we might be at 12 million, and they'll be at like 8.5 million. The
Yeah.
higher you go, the faster you grow, which is not sustainable for long-term growth. That's why they introduced the light speed bundles, obviously.
Now that's an interesting thing too, because I've been pretty active on the subreddit for a very long time, and I remember a time where this game was not like tinfoil hats, but the game was legitimately dying,
Oh
and
yeah,
it was basically a time where it was maybe 4 years in, and the game was considered old in terms of like a game like this, and EA had another game in development, and anytime they had a Star Wars mobile game in development, they'd cancel the other one pretty soon after. And that's when the hyperspeed bundles came out. And
yeah.
I mean, I credit that with pretty much saving this game,
Oh, I agree.
because it kind of introduced the game to people who will spend money, and they could kind of, jump ahead a little bit and get caught up a little bit. And some people hate these light speed bundles. They're not useful to me. I already have this stuff. But I'm like, great, this is going to catch people up. This is going to keep the game healthy. It's going to bring new players in at a very low cost. And they're not going to, it doesn't matter if some guy who just joined the game last week got Ray and SLKR. Like it doesn't affect
Yeah,
me at my level.
we're never gonna fight them in a battle.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if they had more reasonably priced things like that, I'd be a whale. Like $10 for a GL, I mean, sign me up. Obviously, I had Ray and SLKR. I did buy like the Phoenix bundle because I just didn't have them in Relics yet. And like it's a good investment. Like that's I think a better price for like the $200 Zeta bundle that was a few weeks back. Like that's
The
good for some
Omicron bundle.
people.
Yeah.
But I could buy basically three $70 video games with that same amount of money and get 500 hours of enjoyment out of that, or go to dinner 4 times, or
Depends on where you go to dinner, it's like
McDonald's 50 times. I mean,
you could go to McDonald's with like, because like my wife and I, we were in Manhattan last week, and going out to dinner for us, which is not often. We don't have the money to go out to a Manhattan dinner every weekend, but it was her birthday, so we went to a steakhouse, and like that's $300 right there for 2 hours. But that's a special occasion. That's not,
yeah, but
it's
better
a little
value
different.
than $200 on what, a Zeta and a half. Or like, I mean, game of the year Baldur's Gate, that's $70 or $60. That's some of the best $60 any gamer could spend right now.
This is like the antithesis of my discussion with my guild leader, Tish, who we had literally the exact opposite discussion when I had him on. Because I don't disagree with you in theory, but with my schedule, I don't have time to play these games on my PlayStation. So I'm very finicky about the games that I do buy, whereas a Baldur's Gate type of game would have appealed to me at 18 to like 23 when I had limitless time, way more time than you have at the same age because you're going to school and working. But I had limitless time, and I love those experiences where I could play 200, 300, 400 hours. And now I'm lucky if I get 2 hours on a Sunday morning, and then that's my game time. So like for me, and I haven't spent since Marin, but for me, like to spend 20, $30 on the game, that's my enjoyment. That's my gaming budget.
And I agree with that. Like, I also feel like that's part of the reason why, at least through my experience, the like median player age is probably like right around your age, like
Yeah,
35-ish. Because I mean the mobile aspect of it is really suitable for like, a working adult or like my guild, I think at least 47 out of 50 people are dads.
yeah.
And they're playing this game, a bit at night, lunch break, whatever. And we're still a competitive end game guild and they're doing all that stuff. But like the fact that you don't have to sit at a PC and hunker down for 2 hours is one of the reasons why this game is still a thing. Plus, also people more middle-aged people or mid-30s, whatever you want to call middle
I
age.
don't take offense. It's okay.
You guys have grown up with Star Wars in a deeper sense. Witnessing I mean, all the prequel movies coming out and just the hype in between the original franchise, original trilogy, and the prequels and stuff. So there's probably a deeper connection with you guys because lived through more of it. And now, hey, here's a game that's accessible for a working adult.
Yes. And
Even
that's
if it
why I love
isn't
it.
an amazing game. I mean, like Marvel Strike Force in a lot of ways, though I've never played it. I mean, even just looking at the graphics just shows how much better it could be with some extra resources. But while they're
There are
making,
some things. I played it for like 6 months. I really tried to get into it. There are some things that I liked, and this was maybe 2 years ago, so I'm sure it's changed significantly. There were things that I did like better there. There are some quality of life changes that if this game brought on, I'd be much, much happier and I'd be much more interested in spending again. But there are also things that are a lot more grindy, like those red stars back. It's totally random. There's no like, "Oh, I want this guy and I'm going to really focus in on this guy." They found their own monetization strategy, and it's great. And I'm sure the Marvel fans are very happy, with what's going on over there, or not, if it's similar to how we are. I don't pretend to know.
yeah, I mean, Marvel's bigger right now, but I mean, like, I feel like a nice like graphical update. I mean, art in this game has always been top notch. Some of the in-game models have obviously not. I mean, we still have like Potato Ray and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't. They don't have an incentive to,
There's no incentive.
because Bo-Katan came back, 1,000 people wailed on her, and now there's this data crime that people are gonna wail on because she insta kills on a basic and then gets a bonus turn.
This is why
Like,
I'm happy I'm in K2 because I'm very,
me
very
too.
unlikely to see her. Um, doesn't bother me. It is what it is. What I will say though is that when I play the game, I know a lot of people are very into like the art and everything. It's not that I see like numbers and zeros and ones, like I'm not like that, but I don't even look at the art. To me, it's just a habit, and I go in, I don't even care. I could tomorrow they could change every model and I probably wouldn't even notice. I'd go in, I'd do my dailies until I got to the subreddit, and then I'd hear about it and go, oh, okay, that's different.
I mean, I also think at this point in the games, like one thing I've been saying to my guild for the past year or so is power creep in this game has changed. The step from like legendaries to like with Gas and Malik to GLs, obviously that was very explicit, but I've been saying that power creep in this game has shifted into the marquees.
Yeah,
I mean, Marin is like one of the biggest, most recent examples. Tuscan Chieftain turning a literal dogshit faction into a A-tier team at the minimum. Even the Imperial Super Commando rework. I mean, now it can kill Leia on offense one shot with the new Datacron set. Like they, and I wish they would take these reworks and do that to bring up some other teams. I feel like that's one of their easiest ways to make new money. Like, I mean, if they reworked a Jawa instead of a Datacron, like if they permanently reworked Jawa Scavenger or something like that to bring the team to another level, I'm sure everyone who doesn't have relic Jawas, like Kyber 3 and up level, would invest and get them all the relics or something. Like they know how to make characters overpowered. and they
It
can do.
comes
Yeah.
it comes down to word budget, which is something that kind of people started to see with Jedi Knight Revan, right? Like that was the first, for people who are newer and don't realize, that was the first really big huge shift in power creep
Oh, I
with the
definitely
way that
agree.
his leadership worked. And it was so powerful that even when Jedi Master Luke came out 2 years later, you were still using Revan as your leader because it just made way more sense, right? And at that point, we shifted from leaderships that were like, give 30% crit damage to everybody to like an Atlas Shrugged style,
Mhm.
like 1,000-page novel. I don't even read kits anymore.
I mean, Leia's kit is just. I
I
mean,
don't know what Leia does. I just go press that button, press that button.
I mean, Bane's unique is like
Yeah,
I mean, so also with that, like, not only is the game harder for new people because of how grindy it is, but I think the only reason that we can play this game is because we've basically had to memorize 200 kits in this game, and we basically, at least generally, know the interplay of all a team dynamic and how to make teams. With these newer characters, it's gating characters not just by gear and prerequisites, but just can you understand what's going on and make a team around it? And of course, there's datacrons on top of it, and the interplay between that. Like, my guild and I were trying to figure out, okay, what are the best datacrons we should farm for? And obviously, like the Chirrut datacron, whatever. Like, there's all these crazy team comps and the nuances between kits that it will take someone years and years to catch up on this if they wanted to start now. Like, I don't think I'd even recommend this game to a newer player at this point in its life cycle.
it's tough. I mean, when I started playing, there was 100 some odd characters, so you're memorizing, and how many of them were really important? Because you're
Yeah.
talking about like the Tuskens, the Jawas, like all of the shit tier that came out in the beginning. So you're memorizing a dozen teams, and then you're memorizing one kid at a time, right? And now we have over 260 characters. It was about two in the summer when I did the post about how much it would take to max an account in one day, which is impossible to do just because of the way timers work. It was 252 characters, and that was last summer.
And they released the Mandalorians, they released the Leia prereqs.
Hmm. And there's been ships
Gideon.
since then.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're probably at like 260 plus right now.
Yeah.
Now that leads me into two things. Number one, I do want to get to the math, but number two, you don't have to play Kame with Jar Jar, but I have to ask, outside of him, the one character that you want to see come into the game. And I
You
don't
know,
warn you ahead of time, right? Because then you have to think about a cool answer. I don't want you to think of a cool answer.
first of all, I don't agree with you on Jar Jar, but that's a whole nother story.
We could fight about that later.
um, if Bane was in the game, I'd probably say Darth Bane. Um, I don't think I have like a really niche hot take. Like, SWOTOR, I think, has
Mhm.
a lot of untapped potential. I think in a year or so we probably will see the new Star Wars video game Outlaws, that protagonist, and maybe a crew. I feel like I really would like to go back to the Old Republic era,
Okay.
and I think a good next duo of jewels could be like Satil Shan or like a Revan Reborn, or
Which is a
um,
pretty popular choice. I've seen it listed a lot.
that's just what I go to right away because I mean, those games do really expand the lore of Star Wars so much. It's a shame that Star Wars has been very slow to recanonize the stuff. I mean, they did.
Yeah.
I know in the Rise of Skywalker, for all the the movie did wrong, they did recanonize a bunch of names of these Sith lords.
Yes.
But also like the pattern of capital ships. We had like GR Separatists, Bounty Hunter / Empire, and then Rebels, Sith. So like Jedi seems logically next. I know some people said like a Separatist Galactic Legend. I don't see it. I don't get how they do Chancellor Palpatine. Like, I don't
I don't
see
see it.
that.
I
But
would like to see Palpatine. I'd love to see a Chancellor Palpatine, but I feel like he would I like characters that play weird. And it's like Mon Mothma, I love Mon Mothma. Merrin, I'm so happy that she has a weird kit because like that's the style. I played Hots, I played Abathur in Hots, like it's very different. Um, I think Chancellor Palpatine should be like a dark side Galactic Republic. And he should have weird synergies that just tie into the fact that he worked with the Galactic Republic, but not really, right? And it should be like some kind of strange star killer.
I'd like to see him basically be like General Grievous's health steal mechanic from Allies. Maybe
Yeah,
like a almost like how Darth Bane, his lead is like the stat stealing from dead allies thing. I'd like to
yeah.
see something maybe like he drains mastery from his allies and then almost has a Sith. See, the thing is, like, I think the Galactic Legends mindset has been choose a character at their prime. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people didn't like that Luke was the episode 8 version of Luke, but that was Luke Skywalker at his prime. Like, Palpatine was at his prime in episode 9. And that's the one thing I don't like about Lord Vader. I mean, that's like when his midichlorian count was the highest, but the Lord Vader was actually only in universe for like an hour, and then he got
Yeah.
chopped up by Kenobi. But I feel like in general they choose Galactic Legends and stuff at their prime, and Chancellor Palpatine does not fit their model.
I think the other thing you have to remember when it comes to like Galactic Legends and you look at things like Darth Vader, when you start a game like this, you have to balance the idea of characters that'll draw people in versus characters you want to release later. And you need to have a character like Darth Vader in early.
Yeah.
It was either Darth Vader or it was Jedi Knight Luke. It was one of those two was going to be the pull-in. So they chose Darth Vader. If you didn't have that and you just had randoms, you're not having a game like this.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I mean, I kind of wish they would have just had Lord Vader in a suit and maybe something to this, some slight distinction between that and the normal Darth Vader that we've had since launch. But in general, like I feel like Galactic Legends should be at their prime and Separatists, right? We already have Count Dooku, we already have Grievous, we have Palpatine. Those are the three, there's no one else you could really argue. Trench, they maybe could have done more with, but he's in the game. Like, there's no one. The Separatists and the Galactic Republic were led by the same guy. That's the entire point of the prequels.
Yes.
Like, sure, they're a major faction without a GL, but I don't. Do they need one? I mean,
I don't think so. And when you look at right now, I think they've realized that they need to slow down on GLs and they've been doing one a year at this point. And I firmly believe that at some point in the near future, I don't think it'll be this cycle, maybe next cycle, we're getting either Thrawn or Ahsoka as a GL, and then
I
we'll
guess
get the other one. I've been a huge proponent of Ahsoka as a GL. I'm not. I know there's a lot of people that are like weirdly obsessed with her in the way that they think I'm obsessed with Merrin. But if you actually look at the history of the character, she's done some badass shit
she's the
from the
most developed
prequels.
character.
Yes.
She's the most developed character in all of Star Wars,
And she's technically been in all of the eras of the Star Wars films to
and
some degree.
she's she was alive through all 9 movies. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean,
And has had a part, not in the movie essentially, but in each piece of the puzzle, there's some role that she has played. And I do think we're gonna see that.
yeah.
Um
I know they were saying the movie, the new Mandalorian Grogu movie comes out in 2026. So I feel like it'd be a good tie-in for then. But then they
yeah,
said the Filoni-verse like ending of all this is 2028. Of course, will the game be here in 4 more years? We'll see.
I think
But
so. I do.
Thrawn and Ahsoka, I definitely want to see as GLs when they feel like it's the right time.
It's that is going to happen. I know it. I'm telling you, I'm as much as I believe that 2024 is the year of Jar Jar and it's happening this year, and I'm firmly on that. I do think in the next, if not this cycle, then the cycle after, we are getting either Ahsoka or Thrawn,
I agree.
and then we're gonna get the other one right after it.
Yeah.
All right. So now this leads us into our survey.
Yeah.
So over the last, I actually started this in September, I think, of last year of 2023. We're now at the end of January, and I was tracking Kyrotech shock rods on my own, doing 3 refreshes a day at different levels. So at different sims per time. I don't have a better way to say that, but just to see, there's always been like this big issue or this big belief that if you simmed one at a time, if you simmed three at a time, if you simmed five at a time, if you simmed 10 on the toilet while singing the national anthem, right? Like you have like a different drop rate.
Yeah.
And I've always been firmly against it, but I decided around that time I'm gonna start putting some data towards it. I think it was in November that I reached out to people in the community, and I'm looking at it on my computer right now. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would say, I'm not going to just count because everyone knows that I can count. An estimated 18 to 20 accounts have helped us with this survey over the last 5 months. We have data for 1 sims all the way up to 10 sims and everything in between. Varying numbers of data, but still several thousand data points at each one. 24,000 data points total. Okay. And I'm going to name drop Bones because I know Bones is going to be hearing this. He's from Three Scoundrels in a Cantina. He is the biggest motherfucking tinfoil hat motherfucker that I know. And he loves to believe, and I told him I was going to do this too, and I was going to call him out. He loves to believe that there's all this different shit going on. We've got 24,000 data points. Now, the thing with this episode is there's going to be a tie-in post. So at the same time that this is released, I'm going to release the data to the public. And it's going to be a little bit more robust in a week because we have 20 accounts still doing this. And you are going to release a way more comprehensive analysis. So I'll release the dumbed down version with just the numbers, and you are going to release something that kind of says, hey, this is what all of this means because you're much smarter than I am at that kind of stuff. So 25,000, 24,000 data points as of today. And we're going to release this in 1 to 4 days. So I estimate maybe between 25 and 26,000 data points. Tell me what we're seeing.
So there's 2 ways I can do this. Either I can go chronologically through it, or I can start with the results and then explain it. What would you prefer?
So I'm a special ed teacher, and I just kind of I make summaries, and I look at those summaries and I interpret them in my own dumb way, and that I believe is at least for the general public useful. Whatever you feel makes the most sense as an educator and as a statistician, I'm happy to hear it.
Okay, so one general misconception about statistics is, or just, sorry, what statistics aims to achieve is how I say to my students is it's the mathematician's way of making precise, educated guessing, right? The only way we'll know the answer to this is if a CG programmer comes out and tells us. But, in general, in the real world, obviously that's like God or whatever. Statistics is what we use to estimate, probabilities, like what's the true like average height of all people in the world. And we do that, we collect samples, we form experiments, and then we run some results. We find something called a test statistic, something like a mean or a percentage. And then we use some analyses to estimate what the real number we're looking for is. So with your data, first of all, 24,000 data points is a good amount. Obviously, it can only get better. The underlying statistical principle is something called the law of large numbers. I don't know if you've ever heard that before in like a stats class you may have taken. Generally, like how people understand at the base level, if as your sample size gets very large and gets closer to the population size, your sample statistic, which in our case is a proportion, is going to approach the population proportion, the true proportion. So if we got, let's say there was a max number of sims you could do, like 10 billion. Once we got close to 10 billion, our sample proportion would basically be the real one. Obviously, that's not feasible unless you can take a census. So we have statistics to estimate for us. So what I did, I took all the data, and you have it arranged in rows. Basically, the first thing I did is called a chi-square test. So there's three terms that I need to explain in order to explain what this is going on. There's a thing called a null hypothesis, an alternative hypothesis, and a p-value. So the null hypothesis is the assumption we have about the world before we begin. So the null hypothesis usually has an equal sign in it. In this case, the null hypothesis was that all the proportions for each batch size of simming were equal. The alternative hypothesis is that at least one proportion was different. And then we have a thing called a p-value. People love to throw around the term p-value. What it means is it's the probability that you get your sample statistic, in our case, our proportions, given the null hypothesis is true. So like a way to explain that, if the weatherman said in the next week there's a 50% chance it'd rain at least one day, you'd probably want to wear a raincoat at least one day in the next week, right? 50% is high. If it rained in that next week, you wouldn't be surprised about it. If he said there's a 2% chance it's going to rain the next week, and it rains, you might, be surprised. So in that same logic, a small p-value supports the alternative hypothesis. In this case, that at least one proportion is different. So if we get a small p-value, usually the cutoff is 5%. That's like what the US court system accepts. That's like the most common. So if the p-value is less than 5%, a 1/20 chance, it supports the alternative hypothesis. If it's bigger than 5%, that supports the null hypothesis. So we both want there to be no difference in any of the proportions. So you and I would want there to be a high p-value, higher than 5%. The p-value, if I check my printout, was 90%, which means, sorry guys, there's no difference. There's no difference in the batch size of simming. But the chi-square test was kind of a preliminary. Basically, that gave me justification to do further things. With that alone, though, it's pretty conclusive. Like that p-value, if you, back to my example about the weather, if someone said there's a 90% chance of rain tomorrow, you're going to expect rain tomorrow, right? So that is a very, very high p-value and good evidence. Then I did what's called a proportion test, where it basically did the same thing. P-value of almost 70%. So again, more evidence that there is no difference between them. And then I wanted to compare just pairs of two, like a batch size of 1 with a batch size of 2, batch size of 1 with 3, and all those different combinations. All those had, so with that, there's these things called, there's different corrections to balance error rates. And with both a very conservative and a not conservative correction rate, no two p-values were lower than like 90%. So that means between each two pairs and overall, there's no difference. So that evidence is pretty conclusive. And there's one more thing I did, so because I showed that there is no difference between the batch sizes, I could then add it up and find what's called a confidence interval. Now, a confidence interval, I feel like is misrepresented a lot of times, especially I see it all the time in like political polling. People very often misinterpret confidence intervals. So a confidence interval is not like a 95% confidence interval, which is what I'm about to describe, does not mean there's a 95% chance that the true value we're looking for is in that interval. It basically means if you did a bunch of intervals, 95% of them would have the true parameter in it. But what confidence intervals do is give a good range for where our parameter is. And with 24,000 data points, it should be pretty accurate. At the end of the day, we don't know, but with more data points and such, we can shrink it in. So what I found is the 95% confidence interval for the true drop rate of Cairo text is between 22.2% and 23.3%. So we can assume it'd probably be a nicer number, like 22.5, 22.75, or 23. That does mean that your initial guess of 22% is probably wrong. And it's probably not above 23.
I'm happy to be wrong as long as I'm correct on my hypothesis that it is very unlikely that there is a difference in how you sim. That's all I really care about.
Yeah. Now, for the naysayers, there is one thing that can really be debated about this, and that was 2 or 3 key assumptions I made. So I want to address that while you're here. The first is that each player who recorded data is independent of each other. Now, I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. If CG's like, saying, okay, this one guy has good drop rates, we're going to lower another guy's, that's just like, why would they do that? I don't know how they do that. So I think that assumption is pretty reasonable. And because they're independent, we can add them together into one total number. So that's one assumption. Do you think anyone's gonna give me shit about that?
I mean, there's always somebody to give you shit about something.
There's always somebody, but
there's always what I'm going to tell you is that when we make this post, if people do see it, and usually they do, and I'm looking at different people's data right now, and some of these sample sizes are smaller, and some of these sample sizes are much larger. But I guess, and I know you haven't done it because it's not something that either of us would have thought to do, but you still have 4 days where you can do it in the text analysis. I guess you could kind of do the same test from one account to another, correct?
Wouldn't want to do that though.
No.
Basically, like, I have the sheet open too. Some of these people have way too small sample sizes.
Well, that's what I mean with some of us that maybe have a much bigger sample size.
Yeah. Yeah, I could try that. It won't change anything though.
Okay.
But yeah. So that's one key assumption. I think that one's very reasonable. The other is that players were pretty accurate in reporting their numbers. There is always bound to, being off by a few numbers. With how big our data set is, and the fact that this was voluntary and stuff, that shouldn't be too big a deal. The more data that we have, the less errors matter, of course. So hopefully by the time, whenever this is published, we have a few hundred more data points, that issue will be lessened even further. The final one, the one that is definitely going to get the most, hate, is that each individual sim is independent. If that's false, unfortunately, this entire thing means nothing. There's the common, you've heard it, we've all heard it, that when you're close to finishing a farm, CG lowers your drop rates.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this earlier today, how I was going to disprove it. And here's what I came up with. So if, let's say you're farming a character for 2 months, you do 10 sims a day, right? In the beginning, you're probably going to notice what your drop rates are. Maybe you get a 2 out of 10, a 3 out of 10, whatever. In the middle of your farm, if you get a 0 out of 10 one day, you might not even care, right? Like, that just happens sometimes. It's somewhat probable that you get a 0 out of 10 if it's like a 20-something% drop rate. But towards the end of the farm, you get that same 0 out of 10. Of course, you're going to notice it more and think CG's have to get you. So confirmation bias, I think, really clouds the judgment of a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's been no evidence that they actually do make the drop rates worse towards the end of a farm. I mean, I'm not a programmer, but that sounds a little too complicated considering we have all these breaking bugs. It took them 2 years to negotiate Anakin's ship not dying. Like I don't know why this would be a thing.
Well, I will say that one of the reasons that got me into a lot of this is that I've read the trademark is not the right word. Maybe it is trademark. I might be using the wrong word, but it's irrelevant. But I've read the verbiage that the EA does have the ability to do this
Of course they do.
through their copyright or whatever it is. I think it's trademark. But we did do the end game farm as well. I don't know if you're on that sheet too. I was just pulling it up as well, and I'm looking at the summary on that. And I have 65,000 data points in a control group and several thousand in different data sets within different points in a farm, and they're all the same. So that's not conclusive with shock prods. Obviously, they could be doing this with shock prods and not with shards, but over the last 3 years, and I started that experiment when Bad Batch first came out, because that's when I first did this. We've, I think, statistically proven or shown that it's very, very unlikely that they're doing that, at least with shards.
And I can basically look at that data and do the same thing as this and actually statistically prove it, which, yeah, we can talk about that after, but I will do that for free as well. But yeah, basically, like, if the numbers, like, if you look at the shock prod, right, and you look at the aggregated summary page, and you compare row to row, the fact that they're essentially proportional is what that first chi-square test talks about. If they're exactly proportional, like row by row, that's a strong indication that there's no difference.
Okay.
And that's essentially what the chi-squared test does, is compares rows and then gives you the p-value to determine the probability of them being the same or not. So yeah. So if they look basically the same, then yeah, there's evidence that it doesn't change in the farm. Also, shock prods, unlike character shards, there's no like cap on how many you need, right? There's always like an
You always need them. You always need them.
So it does bring me to something that's important, which is if these results can generalize or not. From a statistical point of view, they can't. Like,
yes.
But from a practical point of view, the chance that CG coded in different behavior and probabilities, like making certain things drop off over time, if they did that for each thing, I don't see why they would do that.
Yeah.
I don't see why this result wouldn't generalize from a practical point of view. So statistically, I can't say that, but CG, I assume what they do is come up with a general farming pattern, basically just independent probability. There's a thing called the binomial distribution, which is what this all comes from. And just for different materials, they just assign it in some list, different drop rates, and then just set it to go. Like, there's no reason why they'd have different farming behaviors. That just sounds way too complicated, and I don't know why they'd waste their time on that.
And that is something that I did think about when I first started doing this, and I realized, like, definitely everything can have its own way of doing it, but I specifically picked shock prods because they are a major limiting factor. Yeah. So, it's one of the biggest limiting factors in the game that people are constantly struggling with. So I said, hey, let me pick shock prods because it's not that it's unlikely, but if they're gonna do that, this is where they're gonna do it. Definitely. They're not gonna do it with stun guns. They're not gonna do it with I can't even remember the other gear names, but they're gonna do it with the thing that matters the most. And that's also why I did want to do this with shock prods and battle computers, because I wanted to make sure it was one very, very specific set of data.
Yeah. And yeah, that's the thing, because Kairos are just like the most important gear pieces. It'd be weird if like one of those random purple pieces has a different probabilistic behavior. Like, I don't know why they'd tell someone at CG to waste their time and not just use one script with different numbers for each year piece.
Mhm.
So I do think these results generalize. I mean, through years of playing experience, it seems like that. And based on what you're saying with that other data, this should be the case. I can definitely look at that too, even before we publish this, and so we can put that in together. But I do think these results are pretty conclusive, and there isn't really much leeway to argue against it. Sure, you know, we will never know unless a CG programmer comes out and says it. But this is the next best thing at the end of the day.
So basically what we're saying, just to summarize, is true. I understand, even without you, I understand that I can never conclusively prove something. But if we were to put money on whether they are doing it or whether they aren't doing it, it's far, far, far more likely that this is not happening. Correct?
I'd say it's near certain.
Okay, that's all I set out to prove, and I'm going to continue collecting data, just because that's the kind of person that I am, and I think I conclusively proved the end game farm thing years ago, but I still collect the data just because that's who I am. But that's what I kind of set out to show people, because I think that people playing in more of a mathematical way and less of a feeling way, they're going to spend less money and they're going to be more efficient in their playing. And that's always been my goal. So what I'm going to do is I want to give you the floor for a moment before we sign out, because the Chiefs game is still going on. My wife is watching. I promised her, hey, I'll come out there in a little bit. Normally, I if I'm talking to like a streamer or somebody who's got some kind of presence, I'm like, hey, plug yourself, do something. And I know that that's not necessarily you, but I know you're an alliance leader. I know you're a recruiter. I know that you're hurting as much as I am for that kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you the floor for a minute to plead your case or whatever you want to do, or sing a song. I don't care.
Well, yeah, so I do run a nearly 550 million GP guild. We are down by 2. If anyone's like 10.5, 11 mil GP, I'll be in the comments. Feel free to reach out to me. Last thing I do want to say about the data, because this is actually something that came up. I think people have a misconception over the meaning of this experiment. Because from my experience with people who are generally very skeptical of science and math, what they believe is what I just proved, it means that they're locked into a certain path. But the good thing is what we just proved is the exact opposite. The fact that there's no optimal way to farm means you can farm any way you want. If you want to go one at a time, if you just want to save that extra second and sim the whole thing, it doesn't matter. Like any weird way you want to farm, go for it. Like what this proves is we have freedom in how to farm. And that's why I think it is why that is. Like we have the freedom to farm any way we want. There's no optimal way of doing this. Just sim the whole thing, sim one at a time, do whatever the hell you want. That's what we've shown. You can do that. There is no, if we found that like farming in batches of 7 were the most, lucrative, then you'd only want to farm in batches of 7 for the rest of this game, which would be really annoying, because then you'd always need, if you have 6, you'd want to wait or whatever. But we've shown you have that freedom to farm any way you want and enjoy the game any way you want.
And that's definitely something I've been saying. People misinterpret me a lot, and I tell them, like, I don't care what you do. You want to farm in 1s, you want to farm in 3s, you want to be naked in your bed, like farming in 10s. It doesn't fucking matter to me. But don't tell people that it's affecting your drop rates, because you're wrong. Or at least I thought you were wrong. And now I can't definitely say that you're wrong, but I can at least say I have statistics on my side that's showing that it's very unlikely that you're correct. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like what we've shown is there's freedom in farming, like conclusively. Which
that's going to be the title card. Freedom in farming.
Sounds good. I mean, and I think that's just so much better for the health of the game.
Yes.
Like, because it gets so monotonous to just farm in like 2s or whatever. But just have fun with it.
which has been my life for the last 6 months, is farming in 2s. And you've been telling me farm in 7s. We need more data on the 7s. And I'm like, oh, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do
And
the
it's
other
so
thing.
annoying because I've been farming in 9s for the past 3 days. And it's just
Yeah.
like, then I have to buy all these refreshes and stuff. It's just, but going all the way to full saves me time. It's easier. And
It's so
like,
much
that's
easier.
good for me. If someone wants to do 1s for whatever reason, just do it. You
Do whatever you want to do. That's the whole purpose.
exactly.
So what I want to say is thank you for taking the last hour, 15, hour, 20 minutes and explaining this stuff to me, and just even, we actually spent a lot more of the time just talking about Star Wars in general. So just thank you for taking that time
Of course, thank you for
out
having
of
me.
your day. Oh, let me